What's up YouTube? John here, back with another video, and I wanted today's video to be about the Nick Fuentes and Piers Morgan interview slash debate that happened a few days ago. And this was a real crazy one because in my videos I've been really talking about accountability in government and mainly commenting on the rising popularity and the growing extremity of both political parties, as we're currently seeing the rising popularity of Nick Fuentes, who advocates for, a radically different America than what we've historically seen. And that's really what I mean when I call him extreme. And by the same nature, I think Zoran Mamdani is also extreme because he had just recently won the New York mayorship as a socialist Democrat, which, looking at Bernie Sanders, when he had ran for president, he had lost an election running on nearly the same platform. And that's really what I'm referring to when I call the growing nature of politics extreme. It's not a way to characterize them as being good or bad. It is, as far as being outside of the norms in government. And that's why I think this is really a really interesting time to be talking about and commenting on politics. And this interview was really crazy because, besides Nick Fuentes and, his controversial persona, which I think, if you're not familiar with it, there are clips all online. It's inescapable at this point, but besides that and, his intense racial critiques, I think it's really interesting to see a lot of the norms in politics as far as like with race and the things that he's talking about. There's nothing off topic anymore. And I think there's a good and a bad thing. And that's really what I want to talk about in this video, is kind of the good and the bad that I see with someone like Nick Fuentes really coming into the mainstream. And I think overall with the debate and the interview itself, the real way to sum up this debate is this is the death of PC culture, like being politically correct. Nick quite literally beat this horse to death.
Unless you want to say that's another of your jokes, but you're basically saying, yeah, I'm a racist, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
You're fine with saying you're a racist?
Totally. I think everybody's racist. I think everybody, if we're being honest, is racist. I think everybody, the only people that aren't racist or pretend not to be are white people, to their detriment.
In this interview, because there were times when, Piers was really trying to pin the term racist on Nick, or trying to get him with these little things that would be a death sentence for most public figures, not even just within politics, but within media in general. These would have been death sentences like 10 to 15 years ago, maybe even more recently than that, where you would have been canceled. Like, look at Mel Gibson, for instance, or, the guy who played Kramer in Seinfeld. These people were really the forerunners. They walked so Nick Fuentes could run, as far as like being anti-Semitic. And it's just funny because, in a sense, like, it's crazy to see how far society has, where we're at in society, I guess, where before this, again, was a reason that people were canceled. And now, Nick is on public television basically making a case for why this is the future that the country should be headed in. And I think after watching this, if anything, this was a showcase in how to lose this debate to people like Nick Fuentes, because as soon as you try to pin any label or, try to kind of play this optics game with him, Nick just completely dismantles it. It's like, how do you beat someone that doesn't care about any of these labels? It's like that old South Park episode.
Gentlemen, we are dealing with someone here who has absolutely no life. How do you kill that which has no life?
It's like he really doesn't care. And, this might be the future of what you have to contend with in political debates, where everything is up to question. And I think, going back to the interview, that was really one of the most poignant things, in my opinion, that Nick said.
If the truth is so clear and if there's such overwhelming evidence, why do you need to throw people in jail for disagreeing? And you yourself said, well, there is no debate. I think everything is debatable. I think everything at least should be debated. And if the evidence is very one-sided, let the evidence speak. Don't throw people in jail. So do you think that Holocaust denial laws should be overturned?
I don't particularly agree with Holocaust denial laws. I don't think people should be imprisoned.
Okay.
Where his perspective of, nothing is a rule of law and everything is willing to be questioned. This is really the slippery slope that, you're opening the door to by not engaging with the points that he's making. And that's been my argument in, my other videos, where I can, as someone who can agree with the America First perspective, but kind of has reservations of, his racial criticisms for obvious reasons, and to kind of elaborate a little bit, I think that's a slippery slope, where as soon as you start like microanalyzing racial components with things, it just takes the right person to make an argument for everyone. Like, that's where I think the damaging part of his perspective lies. But, to overall to just try to attack those points and not engage with the main thing he's trying to solve with America First, which is, the failing economy, the lost faith that these men have in society. Like, these are all the problems that, Nick Fuentes and America First are trying to solve. And my point is that if you don't attack these fundamental problems and you don't solve these issues for this group of people, they will only continue to grow in popularity. Because, we saw this with like anything in the last few years that had to do with the debate about transgenderism, where, Republicans were basically told, like, you can't say this, you're transphobic if you say this or if you believe this. And, the result of that was Trump won the election, in my opinion. Like, people do not like being told what they can and cannot say, and if anything, they will push. It's like that meme where it's like the red button. It's like, do not push this red button. If you tell them not to push the red button, they will actually push it. Then they will try to do it even harder. And that's what we're seeing now with, America First and these ideas that Nick has about race, where...
Remind me again, the percentage of black men who commit murder in America. What was the percentage you gave me?
It's 1 in 20. 1 in 20.
It's 1 in 100. Your rate means that you're saying that 5 times as many black men commit murder as the official crime statistics say.
Yeah, there's a report, I believe, on X by Data Hazard. I'll have to go and double check that for you. But yes, there's some pretty shocking evidence that says that it's far more alarming than you would think.
Okay, but you would accept that the official crime statistics are 1 in 100, or you wouldn't accept that statistic?
I don't know. I don't have it in front of me, but I've seen other evidence. Like I said, Data Hazard on X, I believe, produced a report about a year ago. It said 1 in 20. But whether it's 1 in 20 or 1 in 100, that's a lot of people, Piers.
Sure,
this is
a lot
real
of white
problem.
people commit murder too. Well, they do, don't they?
Okay, but it's about proportionality. White people are 65% of the population. Blacks are 13%. And I think anybody would tell you that more black people proportionally commit violent crime than white people, and people vote with their feet. People would rather pay a much higher property tax.
Most mass shootings.
What's with the interruptions?
I'm sorry.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You look at in Chicago, in New York, these neighborhoods are so stratified. People would rather pay a high tax rate. They'd rather pay a much higher property value to live in a less diverse, less black neighborhood, because they don't want to live around the violence. And I think that when you look at even on the public transit, the subway, the blue line, people don't want to go there because they know who occupies and menaces the public transit. It is these people like Daniel Penny had to deal with. It's people like Irina Zarutska had to deal with. And that's just the uncomfortable reality.
Tucker did a better job of confronting this by not really pushing him, but Piers fell right into the trap of trying to get him on this. And you're just empowering his opinions because you're not even engaging with his main point, which is the fact that, Nick's main complaint is that America's citizens, specifically the white demographic, are not being looked after, and that is contributing to a loss of culture, a loss of national identity.
I want you to explain why you think it's fine to say how fucking cool Hitler is and to dismiss the very powerful 90 seconds from a British journalist who lost a lot of family members to the Nazis in such a callous, dismissive manner?
I don't think it's powerful. I think we've been hearing that our entire lives. Okay. The Schindler's List. Let's just be honest. The propaganda is over the top. We have been in America.
What about
and
the Schindler's List?
Tell me about
the Schindler's List. Well, tell me about the Schindler's List.
I'll tell you about it. We have been browbeaten as a people, as Americans, as Westerners for our entire lives. And do you know what this has done? It has taken away any sense of pride, any sense of love for our own civilization. We have been made the villain in our own story. We have been made because, well, let's just be clear. It doesn't begin and end with Hitler is a monster. This has been the political narrative, which is why we have thrown open the borders. This is a political narrative, which is why we can't be a conservative society as a whole anymore, why we can't be proud of Europeans, why we can't be proud of being Christian, because they've told us if you're too white and too proud and too Christian, it's going to lead to a Holocaust. And so my generation, our entire lives,
honestly,
Nick Fuentes, and that's why people like me. That's why I'm popular, because this is bullshit.
Honestly,
yeah, it's a crock. We don't want to hear any more about me mom and me dad. That's the crock of shit.
No.
And unless you can solve these problems, or at least, give them something else that will solve the problems that are affecting their lives, they are going to continue to, nitpick and look at anything that they can. And he's bringing up factual reasons why his opinions are correct. You can't refute statistical evidence with a label. It's like people are gradually seeing society crumble around them. And whether it is or not, this is the perception that people are having, and that's why they are gravitating towards America first. And if you're going to debate Nick, unless you can understand that he is completely tapped in to this perspective of, the disenfranchised white male in America, and the fact that he completely understands their perspective and, is not afraid of these labels. Like, you're not arguing against Nick, you're arguing against people that completely embody this perspective. And that's what you have to keep in mind if you don't want someone like him to win. And, I don't want to give the impression that I am against Nick in any way. I'm just commenting on this as an outside observer. As I said earlier, I do have some reservations about, his racial criticisms. And again, I think that's where the slippery slope lies. But I think that, his factual criticisms of why are we sending money to Israel when we have all these problems here? I mean, this is a scarcity argument here. It only makes logical sense in a world of finite resources when we can perceivably barely take care of our own citizens. Why are we sending this money to Israel? And and in my perspective, that's not even just to them, that's to any country. And this is the all-encompassing point that Nick makes in this interview and debate, where everything is up to question at this point. We as citizens of the country have a right to question things. And if we perceive that things are not going our way, then, we're going to be pretty mad about it, and we have a right to question that. That is the core of Nick's perspective. And, the best counter to this is addressing these problems. There is only so much that people will let the U.S. government get away with, perceivably, like insider trading. And even, to segue into the latter half of this video, was going to be the care package to Ukraine that Trump signed recently, which was like, I think $800 million or $800 billion to Ukraine. I'll correct that in editing. But, people see stuff like this, and a vast majority of people are not seeing anything in the country get better, me included, which is why I can understand this perspective. So, to Nick's point of whether you vote for Republicans or Democrats, you're getting basically the same flavor of ice cream. Nothing is really making a tangible difference here. That's what voters are asking themselves, and they're listening to someone like Nick, who is speaking logical sense, and they're looking around saying, what, we're really not getting anything, whether we vote for Trump, whether we voted for Biden. It's like this country is, in our opinion, going into the shitter, and maybe it does take someone like Nick Fuentes to fix the country, to turn it around. And that's the mentality that, anyone who is critical of Nick, that's what you're fighting against, where this is an act of desperation. This is a Hail Mary. And, you know, to be so blindly, you know, disconnected from this fact, and that's what the perception is. Like when we get news around things like this Ukraine package going there, people will get the perception that, you know, Trump has basically lost touch with his constituents and that there is no alternative with MAGA being the future. They will gravitate more towards the more extreme option. And again, we already saw this with Zoran in New York on the liberal/Democrat side. So again, that's where I think this will be interesting to see, is the trajectory of, you know, Nick Fuentes and where this will go in the future. And yeah, overall, I think that's all I have to say about it. If you have anything to contribute to the conversation, or if you agree or disagree, please consider leaving a comment, because it's really the main reason I make these videos, is just to have an outlet to kind of discuss these topics just from like a third person perspective. Like I think the best way to kind of analyze these things is to not get too attached to the outcomes of it, but just to kind of look at it through an observational lens, which is what I want to do with this channel. But yep, if you made it this far, please stay safe and take care of yourself.